a lot of the flying, 90% of it was realistic.
Every single thing I saw was something I've done in that jet.
What's the most G's you've ever pulled?
It said 11.
Hey everyone, Vincent Aiello here, founder and host of the Fighter Pilot Podcast. And I am excited because today is May 27th, 2022, and we finally get to see Top Gun Maverick after years of waiting, including some delays. Now, courtesy of our amazing sponsors, the Cubic Corporation, we have an entire theater reserved right here in San Diego for a private screening of Top Gun Maverick for Fighter Pilot Podcast family and friends. And immediately after the screening, we are going to have a panel where we will record the reactions of some former Top Gun instructors. Let's meet them. First up is Andy Mariner, call sign Grand. He was our guest on episode 7 called Top Gun versus Top Gun, which you came back and we revisited that recently. And he was also a Top Gun commanding officer in 2017. Grand, before that, you were a Fleet Squadron CO of Super Hornets, and according to the trailer, it looks like Super Hornets really feature heavily in this film. What do you hope to see about the mighty F-18 E and F?
No, I think it'll just be cool to see it showcased in its own Hollywood documentary, if you will. You know, it's the backbone of the fleet right now, and it's the thing that we fly every day. So I think it'll be cool to see it showcased as something in a major Hollywood blockbuster, and to see what they did with it in the film.
Oh yeah, you have not seen the movie.
I have not seen the movie.
Okay, so that'll be fun. I have seen it, but at any rate, now when the first movie came out, I'm going to guess you were about 5 years old?
I was actually 8 when the first one came out.
And so obviously that show cast an enormous shadow, big influence all around. From what you've seen of the trailers, do you think this movie is going to bust out of those shadows?
I think from everything I've seen, I think it will. I've heard good things about it, and I look forward to seeing it tonight.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we'll see you inside, Grant. Thanks very much. Next up is our friend Dave Berke, call sign Chip. He was our guest on episode 59, Anglico. Now, Chip, when you were a Top Gun instructor from 2002 to 2005, we had some overlap. You were the surface-to-air threat and counter-tactics SME. Again, looking at the trailers, it looks like there are some surface-to-air missiles. How big a deal are SAMs in real life?
They're a big deal, man. Yeah, and I'm glad the trailer showed that we might see some in action. And I think every fighter pilot knows one of the biggest threats out there is what's coming from the ground, so I'm glad they're going to showcase it.
Yeah, we'll see. Have you seen the movie?
I have not.
Okay, all right. So the other thing is, since you left the Marine Corps, you work with an organization that does different things with different companies. I assume some of that is dealing with people issues, if you will. Now, one thing I do here on the show is I try to break down stereotypes that Hollywood casts on fighter pilots. So I'm curious, what you've seen in the trailers, do you think this movie's going to help or hinder my efforts?
I think it's going to show some reality. And the cool thing about what you're alluding to is maybe a little bit of ego involved in some of those fighter pilots, which can be a good and a bad thing. And I bet you the movie showcases both sides of that. And look, the reality is Jell-O is everybody's got one, and sometimes they come out a little bit more in certain environments than others. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the movie portrays it.
Fantastic, Chip. All right, well, get on inside there with your lovely bride, Whitney, and we'll see you after the movie. Now, our last guest is our most recent guest on the Fighter Pilot Podcast, episode 143. Just dropped
this
2
week.
days ago,
yeah.
Ray. And so Jim Ray, call sign Jambo. And when you were on the Top Gun staff 1983 to 1986, Paramount came along and said, hey, we would like to film this movie. And you had a hand in that. And that movie really cast the Tomcat as this amazing sex appeal fighter. And I'm just curious, you flew the F-14. Was it as much fun to fly as it looked like on the big screen?
Well, at the risk of being politically incorrect, we used to say it dances pretty good for a fat girl.
All right.
I know this may be cut, but
as long as you don't say a name, I think we're okay.
Yeah, no, look, the airplane is, for its time, it was big, it was new, it was flashy, and it was a lot of fun to fly, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so when's the last time you flew an F-14?
Oh, man, we're going back probably 1993.
Okay, so the point is, it's been a long time.
Been a long time.
Now, we, the United States, retired the F-14 about a dozen years ago, maybe a little more. But in the trailer, we see an F-14 flying, which there is one country left in the world flying the F-14. But I'm just curious, without, I'm just guessing here, if you were to jump back in an F-14 today, do you think you could start it up and take off?
Half blind, one arm behind my back, absolutely. No doubt about it. What else would you expect, Joe?
Of course, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right, Jambo.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're excited to see this film. I am too. We're going to get on in there and take a look. Now, if you are watching with us and you've not yet seen the movie, don't worry. We'll warn you before we have any spoilers. But let's get on in there, and then we'll see what Grand, Chip, and Jambo have to say after the movie. All right, we're back. What did you guys think? All right. Fantastic. Well, some of them evidently have seen the movie more than once, a couple, 3 times for some of you. So, all right. Hopefully it got better every time. Now, for 2 of you, right, Grand and Chip, first time seeing it. So here's what I'm going to ask you guys right off the cuff. We just got up from watching it. The credits just stopped. Grand, I'm starting with you. Scale of 1 to 10. What's your score and one reason why? And we'll talk about a few things here, but what do you give it?
I'd give it a 9 out of 10, I think.
9 out of 10.
I would, and I think I like this one because there was an actual mission behind it, right? There was something to this one, vice the first one was just going through the class, right? So I thought it was really good. I went in with I don't know what's the word.
Low expectations?
Yeah, not low expectations, but I don't know. How do you top the first one, right? So I thought it was really good.
All right, Chip, 1 to 10.
It's a 10.
Excellent. Do you need a reason for a 10?
There's no doubt in my mind that millions of kids right now are going to grow up and want to be fighter pilots, without a doubt.
Amen. All right.
Mission accomplished.
Fantastic. Jambo, here's my question for you. You've seen it already once. This was twice. What's your score now, and did it change? Do you like it more or less?
Well, just to be different, I got to do a 9.5.
Integers only,
Right.
please.
And, the score stayed the same, but it's for a different reason. So I recommend that if you have the chance, you will see it again and see what you think.
Okay. Well, we all know the sequel had big shoes to fill. Grand, you kind of alluded to that. And so considering what you expected from the first movie and the 3 trailers and maybe even the Lady Gaga video if you watched it, I'm curious. I mean, did it meet your expectations? I think we kind of already found that out. Chip, sounds like it did for you. But Grand, was it what you expected or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, and I think that what I really liked about this one is a lot of the flying, 90% of it was realistic.
That's right.
It wasn't the crazy stuff from the first one. So,
Yeah.
I think I appreciate that, and I know because I was in Fallon when they were doing the filming, right, to see that they were actually going out and flying every day, so that the filming was realistic, right?
Yeah, yeah. Jambo, how about you? I mean, we had this stealthy-looking Dark Star thing. We had low-level flying. We had carrier ops, land ops. The movie met your expectations?
Well, at the risk of having a nerd alert, because we're all aviators here, we're going to look at it with a different filter than the average, person who goes into a theater.
Right.
So from that point of view, I mean, an outstanding home run. And for those of you who didn't know, in the first movie, there was no actual flying of the actors filmed that made it to the screen. So, I mean, right there, it's just a game changer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And as you said on episode 143, it's a movie, not a documentary, right?
You might hear that again.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So at this point, for those of you watching at home, if you have not yet seen Top Gun Maverick, go see it on the big screen. I think there's even an IMAX option. And so we are going to start talking about the storyline, and there could be some spoilers. So hit pause, save this Fighter Pilot Podcast video on your YouTube channel, and come back and see us as soon as you have watched it. All right, so Grand, we're going to start with you. This movie is based around the notion of a, quote, secret mission, right? We got the best of the best Top Gun graduates, right? And they're going to, get together, and they're going to learn from the 06. Now, you're an 06, and so 2-part questions here. Number 1, is that how secret missions work? And number 2, are you teaching the young lieutenant Top Gun graduates, or are they teaching you?
Well, I mean, on the first question, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, right?
Of course.
No, but I mean, yeah. But you talk about the secret mission. I would say that's probably not how you do it, but I would say that as a CAG, right,
I'm going to have the people in mind who are going to go execute the mission, right? But I'm also not going to be the one that goes and teaches them that, right? You know as well as I do how Top Gun works. It's going to be the other lieutenant teaching the lieutenants how to go do that mission. And I would far trust those guys over me going to teach the guys the new tactics than, the old guy going and trying to tell them how to do it, right?
Right. And they're all wearing their patches. So they're all recent graduates. Maybe they're on their short tour. Maybe they're training officers. Did you ever feel more proficient than you did probably as a recent graduate or training officer?
No, I would argue that's the most proficient you're going to be. Obviously, we all try to be as good as we can, but life catches up and all the other things that go along with being, an 05 and an 06 catch up. And you try to stay there, but it's not going to be as good as the guy who's sitting in Fallon that's teaching at Top Gun.
Wait, you mean the higher rank you get, you can't just follow around what's happening to every base and on the ship? Hey, again, right? We're not going to roast the movie, but there were some parts like, oh, look, it's the air boss following them everywhere and the nautics commander.
Right, yeah.
You got to have the antagonist.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. All right, Chip. So you, like most Top Gun instructors, everybody here presumably, taught BFM when you were on the Top Gun staff. And so Rooster and Maverick, before the bro love, when they still don't like each other too much, they end up in some sort of spirally thing. And what I want to ask you is that a real maneuver? Is it something we should train for? I mean, is it something we want to get into? What did you take from that maneuver?
Well, I mean, that maneuver itself, it kind of reminded me, it was something we used to call, I assume they still call it a luff berry, where you get across the circle from somebody. And basically you got two people that are in a really neutral position. It's depicted in the movie slightly differently. It's not a maneuver you'd want to get into, but I found myself many times fighting another guy in an airplane, looking across the circle, thinking, I don't have a single inch on this guy in order to see on me, and we're going to stay in this position all the way down to the deck, and the first one to the deck loses. So it reminded me of many dogfights I've been in. It was, from that standpoint, it was realistic enough for me to remember being in many luff berries in my day with some really good pilots.
So you might not want to get into that position, but once you're in it, the first one who flinches,
that's
kind
right,
of giving up the...
And probably not that close canopy to canopy normally.
Well, we talked about that, right, on episode 143 there, Jambo. When you guys were filming in the 80s, you had to put things really close in order for the camera to pick everything up.
Yeah, and that's one thing that stood out to me about this is that to make it look close, you got to be really, really close. So there's tons of stuff in there. I'm sure we'd all agree, especially, fights on. Up through but again, we're picking the fly shit out of the pepper here, and that's not the point.
Yeah,
right. But yes, cinematically to make it look good, you got to be really close.
I thought pepper was made anyway. Well, and so we've got folks from the filming that are coming up on the Fighter Pilot podcast, including Kevin LaRosa, the aerial filming coordinator. And so when I had a chance, I said, "Hey, you told me." Or Ferg did, all real flying scenes. And he said, yeah, well, we can fly 2 airplanes and have them break, and then we can have 1 airplane go up, and we'll lay them over each other, and lo and behold, you have a compelling scene. So, all right, cool. Chip, did you buy the storyline's reason for why no F-35? You're the only one up here that has flown the F-35.
I have flown the F-35, flew the Raptor a bunch of 5th gen time. I looked at that, and I don't think it had anything to do with the plane. Didn't bother me in the least bit. They were just trying to create a storyline to get the Navy backbone Super Hornet in there, which was perfectly fine. I got no issues with that.
You didn't have any issue with the fact that the F-18 and the F-35 are made by competing mega industry folks, and one got somewhat disparaged. Oh, sorry, this new airplane can't do it, and the other was like the hero?
If I wanted to be dismissive of something that was like that, that's probably what I would do too. I'd make a very small comment and move on.
That's right.
I might have leaned over once or twice to talk about with my wife about what I would have done in a Raptor, but using it as a vehicle for the movie, like I said, it's not a documentary. I think they did a pretty good job depicting the reality that a 5th gen airplane is by far the most dominant machine out there, and you don't want to mess around with them.
And we're going to get to that. But let's talk about the low-level tactics. So the fleet already can do this. We teach it at Top Gun. What did you see in the low-level tactics? And but tell me specifically, if we're doing low-level, are LGBs generally going to be used?
Well, you're asking some pretty good tactical questions there, Jell-O, in terms of like how you'd go through it. If I was in a Hornet and I was fighting against an adversary in a threat scenario that was as
robust
as that was, I don't know if I would do something different, to be honest with you. So I think they are trying to create a scenario by which I think for me the coolest part is they showcased actual things you're doing in a Hornet. Real low-level flying, pops, all things I did throughout my career. The tactical implications or applications may be kind of narrow, but every single thing I saw was something I've done in that jet, which was the coolest part about it. I've done 100-foot ingresses, I've done Hornet high pops, I've done full burner, 7.5G climbs, inverted pulls, slewing an IR sensor pod in the dive, releasing an LGB and a high G pull off and egressing, and then simulated moving against AMs. And I'm watching that, and I'm like, everything they did, I've done. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, but you didn't need to be a Top Gun graduate to do it. You're Mark 1 Mod 0
I did all that long before I got to Top Gun. And I think the best part of it, and Grand obviously knows this too, is a lot of the guys that did the flying weren't Top Gun bros. They were just fleet average pilots doing fleet average things, which if you look at it, there's nothing average about it. It was pretty awesome to see your standard Navy Jell-O out there just killing it in the airplane and seeing what the airplane can actually do. It was a good time for me to watch.
No doubt. So, Grand, at one point in the story, Maverick steals an F-18, essentially, which, right? I mean, again, you've commanded an F-18 squadron. Does he have to get the keys? There's really, like...
No, I mean, I guess not.
Okay. You're supposed to tell people it's really difficult. That's why we have great base security, by the way. But he proves that this run, this mission is, central to the story, can be done single seat. Now, you've been mainly single seat your whole career, but as a weapons school instructor with me back in the day, and now as Air Wing commander, you fly 2-seat. Why do you think the storyline needed to add a couple 2-seat Super Hornets here, the F models? Don't we put more people at risk?
No, and I think that's actually one of the parts I really liked, right? They used the F model to slew up the FLIR and use the laser to guide the bomb for the single seat guy who's dropping it, which we arguably do that at Fallon all the time, right? If I want to hit something and I know I want to shack it every time, I'm going to put the guy that can just operate the sensor. That's all he's got to do, right? He's not flying the airplane. He's not doing anything else. He just operates the sensor, puts the laser on there, and the bomb goes where it's supposed to. And we do that tactical all the time. We do, LGBs, and we got to hit a hardened target or we got to hit a wall target. You're going to use that guy to put the laser right there.
Yeah.
I mean, we teach that in Air Wing Fallon.
But in your Air Wing, right, you have squadrons of single seat and 2-seat. If I'm in the single seat squadron, I have to do that by myself, but I have 2-seat squadron do the same thing. So
sure. But I mean, I think that was one of the applications you can use, but other things we probably didn't see in the movie, right? Forward air controllers, right? Things where I got to manage other airplanes out in the sky. There's just a lot of other implications of flying 2-seat that are useful that they didn't showcase in the movie. But that one was a really good use of the 2-seat cockpit that they used in this movie. Yeah,
Jambo, this Top Gun Maverick, well, this Top Gun, I should say, showcased the E2 a little bit, which we didn't see in the first one. Was that part of the storyline in the first place, do you think, with the first Top Gun? It just didn't make it, or were you glad to see it in this one? Or
no, obviously the E2, I mean, it's an integrated, actually, and when the F-14 was the premier fleet air defense asset, it was absolutely critical that you had the E2 in there. So, I mean, we like to throw darts at those guys. I mean, it's just part of the deal, but in all sincerity, absolutely. And I did like, because it did give some depth. Yeah, they may have even had some special operators realistically on the ground to assist with some targeting, but in this case, didn't work out. So at least they had the E2 in there. Yeah, to paint the bigger picture. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, I talked to Ferg, who was the Navy's advisor to Paramount, and they had apparently one of the instructors from Fallon come down to advise on that, and they said, yeah, she does such a great job, just let her do it. And I think it was similar on the Captain Phillips with the corpsman at the very end. Remember when they rescue him? So yeah, good stuff. All right, so Grant, coming back to you, part of the storyline here also is we're just going to pull the wings off these jets, essentially. Now, how common are overstresses, and what does that mean? Like in your squadron, if you had an overstress, is that just like, no big deal, we can save it? I mean, at one point, the air boss like, hey, we may never fly this thing again.
Well, I mean, that would be a pretty significant overstress. But what they're doing, I think they even showed it, if I'm right, I think I caught it, that they pushed the paddle switch.
They did.
And went to over G.
Explain what that is, by the way.
So there's a paddle switch on the stick that will give you full G authority. It'll take the computer out of the loop, and it'll let you pull whatever you need to save the airplane if you got to do that. Obviously, I don't think for a normal mission, maybe this one will buy that, right? The air boss would sign off and say go for it. But yeah, I mean, you don't generally overstress a Super Hornet. Charlie Hornets, different story. They were fairly easy to overstress. I mean, one of my first hops after my 5 hours in a NATOPS check, I overstressed a Charlie.
When you went from a Super Hornet
to a Charlie, right, and had to go, do the go Menesai, sorry, skipper, to 94's CO when I overstressed his airplane in Fallon. And he said, yeah, I got it. That happens because you had like a 3.5 on gas, and when you do that, you can pull it as hard as you want. It's going to give you whatever you ask for. But yeah, it's going to require, and Cagmo will like this part sitting out there in the audience that we're talking about maintenance finally. But that's going to be the maintainers are going to have to go check that airplane out based on what the level of the overstress is, and that could be a full jack job to make sure that that airplane is airworthy again.
Putting up on stands, even dropping the engines maybe.
Sure,
right?
Figuring out where it's cracked and if you did anything to the airframe that it won't fly again.
All right.
So yeah.
So you flew the F-16. What's the most G's you've ever pulled?
I think I got to 9.1 in an F-16.
9.1. Okay.
Yeah.
What about in an F-18?
Probably like 8.2, which that was the overstress, right?
Oops.
Like when
All
you
right.
go oops.
How about you, Chip? What's the most G's you've ever pulled?
The 9G platforms, I flew the Raptor and the F-16. The F-16, to my knowledge, you can't actually pull more than 9.1. That's the math. If you max G and F-16 is 9.1, the Raptor, you will not get past 9, and the machine won't let you do it. Hornet, every good C model pilot in the world knows you can get 8.1 without an overstress. So I flew 8.1 routinely on a 7.5 G jet. Okay. And if you were going to overstress an airplane, just make sure you're symmetric in wings level, and you're going to be fine.
There you go. How about you, Jambo? What was the limit on the Tomcat?
6, 8.
Okay.
Depending on the fuel, altitude, all that stuff. First BFM in the rag.
Oh no.
Slick. No tanks. We've done a bunch of eyeball stuff. About half gas. I'm flying with kind of a madman in the back seat. So we intercept. He turns. A 2-circle fight. So it means he's far away from me. I'm turning the opposite direction. And I'm pulling about 6 G's, nose low. I'm plugged into burner, and this thing is just raging. And the guy in the back says, "Do you see him?" And I said, "Yeah, I see him." He goes, "Well, shoot him." Okay. So I reefed it as hard as I could. Next thing I know, I didn't black out, but it definitely grayed out like you saw in the film. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, "Okay, cowboy, level wings, take it home." And I go, "Well, okay, so what's the deal?" And he says, "Look at your G meter." It said 11.
Whoa, 11.
It said 11.
Yikes.
I got really, really, really good at doing overstress inspections because I had to do an overstress inspection on every overstress for the next 2 months.
They made you the man. Okay.
Yeah.
I pulled 8.4 in an F-18 once, and it needed the inspection. And then, 9 in the F-16 as well. Jambo, sticking with you, the Tomcat's back, the big mighty fighter. What did you make of the footage? I mean, there's no F-14s flying in the West, so they had to make that work. But was it believable?
Well, look, I mean, it's not a documentary, right?
That's right.
And I think it was a great hat tip, especially. We've seen a huge resurgence of interest in the whole Top Gun phenomenon around the world. And I've personally come into contact in the last month or two. Frank and Kerry, we did an event a couple weeks ago. People came from Australia, from France, Germany, just to kind of be a part, to feel like they're a part of it. So I thought it was a brilliant move for them to do it. In terms of the nerd alert, whatever, I don't care.
All right.
I thought it was great. It was a great nod. I mean, against, like you were saying, it's a 5th gen. No. Hey, it's Maverick, right?
It is. That's right.
I want to add one thing.
Yeah, go.
I think something I picked up the second time I saw it that I didn't really so much is that, Baron von Richthofen talked roughly. He said it's not the crate, it's the guy that sits in it. So they changed that to box. That didn't really ring with me the first time. But to me, that's the theme they were trying to get. It's not really the crate, it's the guy that sits in it. And that was kind of central that I really picked up on this time.
I was glad, though, the Navy movie did say box, because I was sitting next to Boat, who I think might be our only Air Force guy here. Maybe there's others, but I saw him squirming. So that was good. Sticking with you, though, Jambo, 2 guys starting, hijacking, if you will, an F-14. Is that believable? I mean, maybe you went on the road and had to start yourself?
It's Hollywood. It's not a documentary.
Well, and again, it's not a roast either. I just want to know what's believable. How about the ejection seat didn't work? Now, again, I don't know if this is Hollywood or not. Was that ever a thing? I mean, every jet at some points has what we call a red stripe, right, Cagmo? Something comes up and, hey, ground the fleet. We got to fix this thing. In the F-14, was an inoperative ejection seat ever an issue?
No. I mean, I've heard rumors about how they're maintained by that other force that still flies them. But, this is supposed to be fun, Jell-O. You made me go back and dig into my NATOPs. to see.
Yeah, because I gave you the outline, by the way. So.
I know, but no, because you did ask about what do you do if. And believe it or not, in our NATOPS manual, pardon me, it's the popcorn. There actually is a procedure for bailing out.
Wow.
Yeah. And in the big bold letters says, warning, this is an extremely hazardous maneuver. So right there, you know, it's like, nah, you picked the black jelly bean that day, just accept it.
Yikes.
You know?
All right. The what was that there, Chip? An Su-57. They didn't really name the country, right? They didn't name the threats.
The enemy.
The enemy, yeah. But I thought, I mean, it looked good. I did fight an F-22 once, and I wouldn't say it was like a dedicated BFM. I was in Northern Edge up in Alaska, and I was in a position that was pretty common for, you know, when starting like an offensive perch. But the next thing I know, we're having a neutral pass, and I thought, what just happened? So how believable from your experiences was what we saw there? And then I want to ask you about the Cobra maneuver thing.
Yeah, you bet. So I was lucky enough to fly Raptors, almost 4 years flying the F-22 as an exchange with the Air Force, which was an unbelievable thing. The highlight of those 4 years flying Raptors is I was the first guy to take the Raptor up to Top Gun's Grad 1v1.
Nice.
So I'd been up, obviously, as a bro. I went back, and as soon as I started flying F-22s at Nellis, I'm like, my goal is I'm going to get Raptors to Top Gun, which I did, and did the BFM Derby up there, which was a blast. And then we did a ton of dedicated 1v1s at Nellis with the guys out of Lemoore. So I had a blast doing that. You know, I flew Vipers. F-35 is a little bit different. Obviously, a bunch of different Hornets. A fifth-gen platform is like comedically wildly better than anything flying in the world. And so I thought they did a really good job doing two things. One, having the fourth-gen legacy pilots recognize that you just don't want to be in the air if there's a fifth-gen platform. And despite the fact that there was some movie part of it, the way that they were sort of enamored by the maneuvers of that fifth-gen enemy plane is about right. And I've seen it from both ends, obviously. The Raptor does things that other airplanes just simply don't do. And if you're not careful, you'll just stare at it and wonder what's happening, and you'll blink and you're dead. And that's kind of how it works initially with a fifth-gen airframe until you kind of get more used to it. But there's a massive advantage in a Raptor that you don't have in other platforms, and it's cool to see.
Is that just flight controls? Is it the airframe itself? Is it the thrust vectoring? Yes, yes, and yes?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that being said, we see what looks like a Cobra maneuver. I don't think I ever used that term when you and I were in Air Wings together, but F-18, is that what, Grand? Just a high angle of attack excursion kind of thing that he's doing there, or is it Hollywood?
I think, well, that's a lot of Hollywood for that. Whatever, I mean, yeah, whatever that looked like, that was kind of a crazy maneuver for their fifth-gen enemy fighter.
Yeah. Jambo, what about in the F-14? He does like a split throttle pirouette. That sounded kind of risky, but I never flew the big fighter.
Yeah, I don't know whoever the advisor was on that, but that, I mean, if you think about it, that's like the gutsiest move I ever saw, right?
$5.
I mean, but if, I mean, that's something that's unusual that's going to give you some kind of maneuvering that's not by the book. Depending on which platform it was, honestly, I didn't pay attention. If it was an older F-14, you're going to be a glider because you're going to snuff a motor.
You'd be snuffing the motor out.
Yeah,
right?
you'd snuff the motor out. The F-110 engine, a lot more stable. Possible.
That was the engine on the F-14 B and D?
D, yeah.
Or just the D?
Yeah, I think at least the.
Sorry.
Maybe the B plus, yeah. Stump the star, I know. But yeah.
Grand, on the lighter side, we see some of the shenanigans, if I'm allowed to say that, at officers' clubs, and you and I have spent some time at some. Is this bell ringing thing? Is that a thing? Ever happened to you?
That is 100% a thing, and yes, it has happened to me. For the exact same thing that it happened to him in the movie.
Yeah. What are some of the offenses that might cause the bell to get rung?
Don't wear your cover in the bar.
So when you walk in the door, no hat on.
No hat. Don't put your phone on the bar.
Okay. Don't put your hat on the bar.
Don't put your. Well, yeah. Don't have your wife call you while you're at the bar. Don't roll 5 naturals when you're playing Fight or Die.
Fight or Die.
You don't want to do that. What's some other good one? Don't go behind the bar. Sloppy dice.
Yeah.
That'll get you every time. And obviously the house rules depend on where you're at, right?
Yeah.
So in Lemoore, you can put your phone on the bar, but in Fallon and the I-bar you can't, right?
Is that because nobody goes to the bar in Lemoore? Hey, no, it's actually getting pretty good. Don't be mean. I haven't been there in a while.
We go every Wednesday night. Come on, it's club night in Lemoore.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got different rules at different places.
Do you happen to remember them? We don't know how much Maverick had to pay. Do you remember how much your highest bill was?
Oh, I had a good one on an Air Wing night in Fallon with everybody there, and I think it was about $700 for the whole bar.
How about you, Chip? Ever had a big ring?
I've seen the bell rung many times. I was fortunate enough to never violate the rules and have to pay myself.
All right. Jambo?
Yeah, when I got orders to Top Gun, I walked in the bar and put my cover down.
Because you were celebrating?
Absolutely.
I did that when I got promoted from 03 to 04.
And that's also a tradition in a lot of places. When guys get promoted, they'll come in mass, and it's a party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I want to ask you this because I don't want to talk about it, but officers' clubs were a bit different when you walked into the bar. All right, moving on. All right. So for you, Jambo, you had tax ranges back then, right? Gutsiest Move again that we saw?
Yeah. We had radios and TVs. And,
what did you use, like 3/4-inch tapes as well? That's what we used to use in the Hornet when I first flew the Hornet.
No, the tax range, the trailer right there outside of Hangar 2, and then over at Yuma.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Chip, when you and I were on the staff back in the 02-ish range, I left right around then when you got there. The tax range, the instrumented ranges, were a big part of what we did. Now, what we see here is a little bit more like what our friends at Cubic Corporation are working on, this live virtual construct, where we get the highest fidelity training by some of the folks are actually out on the range, some are in simulators and their doppelganger or whatever is out on the range, and then some are just virtual, just, hey, we can program it in. How important is what we saw depicted in Top Gun Maverick for training? Again, they're getting ready for combat, but is that a big part of not just Top Gun, but really fleet exercises?
Yeah, it's really important. I think there's two very different aspects. In movie touched on it, and your comments, I think, touch on it too. One is, one of the most important things when you're doing a debrief is to actually know what happened. And without that instrumentation, I'll come back, I'll think I saw one thing, somebody will come back and Grant will say, I saw something else. And we might not have the information to be able to get to the debrief we want. So it's really, really important to be able to depict what really happened so I can see, what I thought happened was not right. The other thing that's really cool with the modern stuff, and nice plug for Cubic there, Jell-O, I'm impressed, is it's really hard to generate an adversary force relevant and robust enough to cause a problem for our current fleet. So you got to put a lot of airplanes in the sky, especially when you're talking 5th gen. A lot of airplanes, a lot of surface air threats, and it's simply not practical to do that. So this live virtual constructive world that we've helped create, or they've helped create, is what gives pilots now realistic training to face in the real world, because to build that in reality right now on a training range is almost impossible. I shouldn't say it's impossible. So this LVC world that they're doing is really an awesome thing.
It also helps with range constraints because it's just not big enough. And me and my airline capacity, by the way, every time I fly by, I'm like moaning at you guys like, you're making my flight longer and for 200 people behind me. But yeah, this way we can have virtual larger ranges, which is not so easy because the military and the airlines are kind of beating each other up a little bit. All right, hey, Jambo, in both movies, we see gatherings, call them briefings, in hangars. Was that a thing and they just had to bring it back again? Because I never...
It's Hollywood, not adopted.
Darn
I know. It gets old. But no, that's a good question. The reason, no and no, mostly because I love that when the very first brief at 2 Hornets go by, it's like, what? So just for the noise level alone, on the beach, it's one thing, but on a ship, you know how it is. It's always noisy.
Yeah.
Number two, when you're looking at these kind of things, there's operational security, right? There's some secret squirrel stuff that's going to be talked about, shown, whatever, and that's not the environment to do it. So no.
I would argue if you were doing that brief they did in there, it's probably top secret, right? They're probably not sitting in the middle of the hangar bay on the carrier, letting the random plane captain walk by that's taking care of the airplanes in the hangar.
No, the hangar looked empty.
I mean, but how do you make it look cool on the boat unless you do it in the hangar bay or on the
course.
flight deck? So you got to do it one of those two places, right?
Of course. Gran, but stay with me here for a second because you and I have been in a lot of debriefs, as have the other gentlemen. But sometimes when a training flight, just goes so badly, you just can't nitnoid every little thing or you'll be there all day. And, Top Gun and the rest of the fleet, we tend to do that sometimes. But what did you make of the comment, why are you dead? I thought that was interesting because if everything really did go poorly, you might just want to pick the couple top 3 things, right?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to ask a guy why they're dead. I think that's just a play back to the first one, right? Like, what are you going to write in the letter to, oh, your son's dead, right?
Your sons are dead because they were stupid.
Right, they were stupid, right?
There was some fan service clearly in the movie.
Sure, and I got it. But I don't think you're ever going to focus on that because the point's not to really break a guy down, right, and make him think about stuff. I mean, obviously we got to think about that because it's what we do, but you're not going to do that every debrief. You're going to go, all right, what can I take away from this and what can I learn? What's the big thing that I can focus on next time so that I can meet the wickets of what they're saying I got to do to go execute this mission? You're probably not going to focus on the little bit of macabre of like, oh, you're going to die because you were off by 2 seconds, right? That's probably not where we're going.
Jambo, Ed Harris's character, Admiral Kane, I want to say, he was talking about the, coming end of manned fighter. And, we hear that in our generation. I'm not calling you old, but I'm wondering, when you were flying
what was that scene in the movie? Made it sound like, well, somehow you made yourself sound like a dick.
Yeah, trust me. My wife's right over there. She can tell you I do that all the time. But what I'm wondering is, not too well asked so far, let me see if I can recover, is was that a thing even when you flew the F-14s? Was it like, oh, the next jet is going to be unmanned, you guys are almost out of a job?
Okay, let's do a reset. This was 83, 84, 85, okay? Nobody had a cell phone.
Or a personal
Nobody
computer, probably.
Had a cell. Can you imagine life without you didn't have a cell phone?
There's probably no one here without one, by the way, now.
That's correct. We, in admin, the big thing was personnel had a computer, tracking flight time and stuff. And I remember it's a big deal when they upgraded the memory, they doubled it from 1 to 2 megabytes. Okay, so the idea of this the one focus for us that was kind of future looking was the fruit of that's being born right now and what you're talking about, and that is it's super maneuverability, because that was more conceptual. And engineers could kind of work that out. With the technology for the drone stuff didn't even exist at the time. Nobody could dream about it. So, little nearer horizon. That's what we were. That was the Star Wars gee whiz stuff at the time. Was the super maneuverability. Yeah.
Chip, you've flown F-16, 18, 22, 35. You stay involved in some of this stuff. What about today? Are we talking about 35's the last of the manned? Is Ed Harris right?
I would not be surprised if we're one generation away from the last man fighter. If it proves the 6th-gen platform's the last man airplane, I'm not predicting it, but if it happens, it won't shock me. Things that are happening, even from a sensor fusion standpoint, I'll speak generically, but things are going on inside the cockpit of a 5th-gen machine that are sort of getting to the point where the person up there, I can see how the glide path will be over time. There's a lot of mission sets where that person is not required. Maybe not all of them, but if I'm lucky to reach Jambo's age, I won't be surprised if at that advanced age somebody says like, "Hey, we just built the last man fighter." So
yeah.
Good luck.
Chip, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat for a second. Out in front of the mural there before we started, I asked you about my help, if you will, with this movie, breaking down stereotypes. Hangman clearly has a very healthy ego in this movie. You also, by the way, have commanded a squadron. How do you, both of you gentlemen, and now as an air wing too, is that a realistic personality trait these days? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Yes. People have massive egos. They don't always depict it,
you're hurting my cause here.
The same way here. There's egos. I mean, the company I work with now, the most important attribute in a leader is humility. And humility is something you got to teach. Now, does that character sort of reveal it in a way that's really, really overt and obvious? Yes. But ego usually reveals itself in a very subtle way, not by being loud and obnoxious, but by not listening. And something I saw at Top Gun a lot, and something I saw throughout my career and the private sector, is when your ego gets in the way, you stop listening. Now, sometimes you're just sitting there quiet, but your ego is sort of raging out of control. So he was depicted overtly, but ego's by far the biggest challenge I dealt with myself and the people around me, because if you want to influence them, they got to be willing to listen to you, and if they got a big ego, they're much less likely to listen. So if you don't think you're dealing with ego, you're missing something, because everybody's got one, and they usually get out of control when you're feeling threatened, and that's what they were depicting.
Grant, you've been on the staff the most recently. When I was on the staff, we would talk about a prospective bro, if you will, coming to the staff. Bro is just the name for a Top Gun instructor. And invariably, someone would say, he's a great stick, but he has a certain attitude, versus, he could be improved, but man, he is an awesome dude. Which one of those are you generally going to take when you guys are sitting in those staffing meetings?
I'm going to take the awesome dude that I can generally improve, right? Because that's the guy who can get along with everybody, right? I mean, and it goes to his point, right? The ego that's unchecked I mean, he's the dude that winds up at the FNAB, right? Like, that's the guy who you can't control because, I mean, I'd argue a little ego is good in our business, right? You probably want to think you're good.
Confidence for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe a little ego thrown in there, right? Because you want to be good at your job, right? Like, it doesn't pay to be not good at this job. But I'm 100% gonna take the guy who's the life of the ready room and can bring everybody around him, and I just got to work on his stick and rudder skills, right?
Because it's probably easier to work on stick and rudder than it is ego and attitude.
We can teach that guy to fly, right? We'll get him there, right? We
Get
can
him there if
do
they made it
all day
that
long.
far.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can I add a very poetic description that we use when?
But you have to
discussing that?
rhyme.
You can't push a rope and you can't polish a turd. So when you came across a guy like that, and I know somebody's heard that before, that's when you just realize that's it.
Yeah.
You got to cut them off.
Fantastic. All right, we have a few minutes left, and if we have any audience questions that, here's one. Hey, what do you know? All right, go ahead, Hillary. What's your question?
Hi, guys.
Hello.
So not that my background is similar at all as far as life and death situations, but having been in a school where it's like the top 1% of the 1%, I've been through that with music, and I've been through kind of like the weekly, like you kind of feel like it's just anything you do is not good enough. As instructors, are you guys taught how to kind of motivate people in like the right way so that they get better, but not so that they're kind of defeated? Is there like a medium that you have to kind of?
Oh, I would say if I can jump on that and then I'll turn it over to one of you. I think that's really the true mark of a Top Gun instructor is not that you just know your stuff cold, but that you can deliver it and instruct it and make someone better and not just beating them down. But Chip or Grand, help me out here.
I think too, what I see is the guy who's you become a better instructor by being willing to admit your mistakes, right? Like if you're the guy who shows that I'm willing to own up to my own mistakes, you make the guy that you're teaching, he makes it he or she is a better instructor then, because they learn kind of that humility of and I don't want to say you beat a guy down to build him up a little bit, but sometimes you kind of do, right? Like you got to do that a little bit to get the guy.
It's like boot camp,
right? A little bit to go. Okay, well we're gonna drag it out. We're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going through the debrief, and we're just gonna make you better, right? Like that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
For me, it's interesting to think about. I got to the staff in summer of 2002, right after OAF kicked off, and so the entire world had pivoted from a peacetime world to a wartime world, and so. The cool part about that is that everybody we're training was going to war. Right after Top Gun, they're going to go back to their fleet squadron, they're going to go to war. What I learned there is something I still think about today is you can be really, really hard on somebody. You can actually be really brutal in some of those debrief points. And in Top Gun, you're going to get into the nitty-gritty. If the person you're talking to believes that you care about them, if they believe that what you were doing is to help them stay alive, help them be successful, and help them win, and if they believe that, you really didn't have to worry too much about how they're going to react because they knew everything you told them was for their benefit. So for me, the most important thing wasn't necessarily just the quality of my debrief, which of course it's critical that you do it well. It's for them to realize that everything I was saying was to try to help them get better. And if they believe that, you could say anything and you didn't really have to worry about how they'd react because they knew it was in their best interest, and they would usually take it for a good cause and take advantage of it and get better.
Fantastic. Jambo, you want to add anything?
Real briefly. The challenge that I found when there's a guy that was struggling was I took it on myself to try to find another channel to communicate with it. So that ended up making me a better instructor along the way. That's all I wanted
Fantastic.
to add.
All right, I think we have another question from the audience.
Who's the best pilot you've ever seen?
Are we in?
Who's the best
Can I
pilot?
say myself?
You can if you want to be like. Why am I? Oh, The Right Stuff. Great question, by the way. Speaking of that, The Right Stuff was the one movie I didn't think this movie kind of borrowed from, but I did see Star Wars, right, with the trench, Behind Enemy Lines with the snow, Firefox. Come on, I know everyone remembers Firefox, stealing airplanes, and then now The Right Stuff.
Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible. All right, Chip, who's the best pilot you ever saw?
I don't know who the best I've ever saw, but the list of people better than me is a really, really long list. So it'd be hard to name one. I will say this very quickly. When I got to the staff as an instructor, as a kind of a senior Jell-O, having been to Top Gun as a student, I'd been a full qualified pilot and been to war, I was pretty comfortable with my own skills. And I went out my first B of M flight with a guy named Dan Dixon, who was the skipper at Top Gun at the time, and he he did things in an airplane that I didn't know you could do. I was an IP at the time, brand new Top Gun instructor, and he's the one that opened my eyes that there was an entire world of capability in an airplane that I didn't fully understand. And I'll remember that flight I did with Dix that was just sort of overwhelmingly lopsided, not just because he was so much better than me, but he made me understood that I didn't realize how much better I could get. And I owe a lot to that as early on learning that I had a lot to, and I never got to a point where I thought I knew everything, but flying against that guy was really humbling. Really cool, but really humbling.
For sure. All right, you guys, we're just about out of time, and I've got a couple notes here to wrap up. Top Gun Maverick, are you ready? 6 crashed planes, 5 ejections, 2 stolen jets, only 1 death, thank goodness, and a tower buzzed, of course. In the middle of all that, of course, is the interpersonal drama with Goose's son and Maverick's old fling, Penny Benjamin. There's humor, drama, romance, sorrow, redemption. Grand, in closing, anything else missing from the movie that you were hoping for?
No, I think you got all. I really liked it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I think you got all of it.
Chip?
That's a small price to pay for freedom. I love it. I was on board.
All right. Jambo?
Well, we went head-to-head with Tony Scott over the movie, and he basically said, look, I'm not going to tell you guys how to fly the effing airplane. Don't tell me how to make an effing movie. I'm not going to tell those guys how to make a movie. It was a home run.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being on the panel today. I want to thank everyone who was here in attendance. I want to thank everyone who might be watching. And I certainly, once again, would like to thank our corporate sponsor, Cubic, for making this possible. For everyone watching, go check out thefighterpilotpodcast.com. You can follow us on your favorite social media channel. And that'll do it from here in San Diego. Good night.